Have you ever understood something perfectly and still could not do it? Not because you're not smart, not because you haven't done the work, but because somehow the very knowledge that is supposed to help you keeps getting between you and the thing you are actually trying to access. That is the insight I gained at Eckhart Tolle's retreat in Whistler, British Columbia last June. And when he started to talk about this dynamic, I felt something in me go very still, because he was describing me specifically in a way I had not had language for until that moment. He was describing the place as a long-term practitioner where I continue to get stuck. Now, I've always loved the way Eckhart talks about different ways of knowing. He talks about the deep knowing, or knowing through being, the vertical dimension of the present moment. This is an experiential, deep being. And then there's the surface knowing, or knowing on the horizontal, doing, thinking, conceptual dimension. Knowing through concepts. Both are good, both have value, but there's a deep wisdom in understanding the place of each, especially, I think, for long-term spiritual practitioners. One of the analogies Eckhart loves to give that you've probably heard before is he talks about walking through a forest, knowing the forest in this deep experiential way, feeling the crunch of leaves under your feet, hearing the insects, feel an insect crawl across your skin, touching and smelling the dew on the leaves. That is knowing the forest. And he taught this at this retreat in a way I'd never heard him teach it before, in a way that was particularly relevant to those of us who've been on a spiritual path for a long time. The first pass is this being dimension. You simply experience it. You taste the honey. You stand in the forest and you take it in with no concepts, no analysis, maybe not even words for what you're experiencing. It's just this, right here, right now. Experiential knowing, the deep knowing. Then he talked about, ideally, there would be a second pass. The second pass is a pass in which you learn. You read the history of the cathedral. You study the ecology of the forest. You understand the terminology and the structure and the principles and the science behind what's happening here. This is the conceptual pass. And this is where most of us in the general world spend a lot of time. This is the focus of our educational system. It's the conceptual pass. Those of us who are in helping professions, therapists, mindfulness teachers, there is a lot in the part of our brain that's part of this conceptual pass. But then, and this was the new idea, he talked about that ideally there's a third pass. You go through that forest or that cathedral, or you taste that honey again. But now you carry everything from both that first pass and that second pass with you. And you start to engage in the game, the play of finding this balance between the doing and the being, the doing and the being, the knowing in a deep conceptual way and reaching for the wisdom and higher intelligence of the present moment without getting bogged down with all of the stuff you know from the second pass. Now, let me tell you what I've struggled with 10 years down the road from my first pass, and I've spent the last 6 or 7 years really building out my second pass with lots of conceptual knowledge and understanding, as I still sit with all my human limitations, and I have old fragments of ego and pain body resurfacing in a new season of my life. This is where I think I keep getting hooked. I'm comparing this pass to my first pass, which felt magical, mystical, almost like this miraculous lifting of the pain I was in. So there's a barrier there of comparison to my first pass. And then my second pass keeps pulling me back instead of allowing pain body to come forward or feeling that ego voice in my head. And instead of relaxing around it and surrendering back into presence and finding the stillness underneath that voice in my head that I learned how to do so intuitively, now I have all this information and I start to try to attack the problem or fix the problem on a conceptual level. I'm applying parts work to it. I'm trying to classify, and it's keeping me in the space of thinking. And if there's one thing I've learned for myself and that I teach my students every day, you cannot talk yourself out of a trauma trigger. You cannot conceptualize your way out of pain body. Only being can do that. So this is the third pass. And to me, I see this third pass as the rest of my life's practice. The goal, your understanding deepens your experience without replacing the wisdom of the experience. The knowing about honey enriches the tasting of honey without blocking the taste. I have a moment I write about in my memoir, Undone, Unafraid, which gives a very up-close picture of what it looks like to move through pain body and find the tools of Eckhart Tolle and other teachers in that same space to realize this deeper inner freedom that I think captures what the third pass actually feels like. 2.5 years into my own recovery, I was sitting in my therapist's office as my husband read aloud his full history. And in that room, not from a concept, not from something I could explain to anyone, but as a felt, embodied truth that moved through me like a wave, I finally understood that none of what had happened in his betrayals was really about me. I had said those words hundreds of times, in circles, in therapy, in my journal, in conversations with my sponsor. I had said them so many times I thought I knew them. But this, full disclosure, 2.5 years in, was the first time I actually did. That my body knew it. At the same time, my conceptual mind knew it. And a different level of peace and surrender dropped out from inside of me. That was a moment of a third pass. And that, for me, is what it has looked like and feels like when the conceptual knowing has done its work of building out more awareness without cutting off the deeper knowing that comes through being absolutely present with whatever's going on inside of you in that moment. I am on another third pass. I've been studying these teachings for over 10 years. I have a lot of conceptual understanding of presence, ego, pain body, the now. I teach it every day. And in a lot of places in my life, I'm able to live it. And yet, my second pass is sometimes still blocking my third pass. So what that looks like in practice, when I'm in pain, when I'm triggered, when my pain body is activated, I reach for my concepts. I reach for my frameworks. I reach for all the things I know about what is happening and why and what I should do about it. And in doing that, I skip right past the only thing that could actually help me, the being with it, the direct experience, presence, awareness itself. Eckhart said something about this that was almost uncomfortably precise. He said the goal, especially for long-term practitioners, is to trust the awareness, not your skills, not your knowledge, not your understanding of the teachings. Just trust the awareness. And for someone like me, someone who's built a whole life and a professional identity in some ways around understanding these things and being able to explain them, I know the wisdom of what he's saying. And I know it's something I need to be reminded of again and again and again. Because what he's saying is, your knowledge is not your power. It's just information. And it might be helpful, yes. But the awareness is the power, the being dimension, the present moment. And my attention is the power. Am I giving my attention to the concepts or the pain body? And in that moment, what if I could shift and give my attention back to the stillness? That's what I was able to do 10 years ago without any conceptual knowing. That's what is my challenge to still do today and still benefit from being informed by all of this. The awareness is the power, and you can access awareness with or without the knowledge. You cannot access awareness through concepts. So what does this actually mean practically? For me, it means that when I'm in a hard moment, the move is not to analyze. The move is to pause, to notice, to feel what I'm feeling without immediately reaching for a framework to explain what I'm feeling. To let the pain or the confusion or the discomfort just be what it is without layering my conceptual understanding on top of it or layering shame that I should be somewhere different than I am because I've been in these teachings for 10 years because I'm a mindfulness teacher. Taking ownership of my attention is a different muscle entirely. And I'll be honest, I am still working with this every day. I still reach for the concepts. I keep wanting to understand my way out of discomfort. But there is an awareness in me now that recognizes that reflex when it happens. And that recognition feels stronger after this retreat than it's ever been before. That recognition is the third pass, is the awareness beginning to open. And the way I've seen this work in myself is that the awareness knows a lot more than I do. So if I can just get out of the way, it will continue to unfold. My job is to pay attention to when I'm going back into the patterns that keep me from it. If you are a long-term Eckhart Tolle student or spiritual seeker, if you know these teachings, if you can describe the pain body and the ego and the now from memory, I want you to know about my Undone Academy. It's a year-round framework that gives structure, community, and step-by-step practice to this kind of universal spiritual journey. I know that I would never be where I am today without a container that's allowed me to consistently practice, consistently make progress, have something to focus on, and have a community of fellow practitioners to share that journey with. I'll include the link below if you're interested in learning more about that space. In close, I want to ask you one question. When you are in a hard moment, do you reach for presence or do you reach for your knowledge about presence? Because I am seeing so clearly in myself, those are very different things. And if you're mostly reaching for the knowledge, if your second pass is drowning out your third pass, you're not alone. I'm right there with you. We're in a lifelong practice and we're right where we're supposed to be. The practice isn't knowing more. It is trusting the awareness that you already have that is underneath all of the mental noise. I'm Becky Moller, mindfulness and meditation teacher, creator of Undone Academy, author of Undone Unafraid. And in the next video in this Eckhart Tolle retreat series, we're going to go into the pain body, specifically why it can still completely take you over even after years of healing work, and what actually helps. Trust the stillness and give your attention to it.